Many of us have heard about false narratives when it comes to the news and politics, right? But have we thought about false narratives when it comes to our relationships? Do we realize that a false narrative can occur in a relationship with our spouse? And do we realize that those false narratives can cause us to question ourselves, to question our value, to doubt ourselves, and to keep us in a toxic relationship because we're fearful that nobody else will love us? If you feel like a shell of a person and you don't know what the truth is anymore about yourself when it comes to your relationship, you'll want to watch this video. Hi friends, glad to be back today. And today I want to talk about the whole concept of self-doubt, the false narrative, and questioning our value. It's interesting because we hear it in the news all the time, right? Those false narratives about various things, politics, the list goes on. But did you know that this actually happens in our own households? That sometimes we can be dealing with a spouse or significant other that uses these false narratives to make us feel, well, sad, fearful, trapped, various different things, right? And let me give you some examples of those false narratives. Okay, one good example of false narrative is when somebody keeps saying, you know, you have nobody. I'm the only person in your life. You cannot count on anybody. If I wasn't here, you would be completely alone. Okay, and that narrative is very interesting because what does that do? That makes us cling more to that other person. We actually cling to them, you know, like for our life because we apparently don't have anybody else in our life. It makes us also question our other relationships outside the relationship, thinking maybe it's really not that good of a relationship, or maybe that person really doesn't care about me. Another false narrative is, you know, you have no friends and nobody likes you. They don't respect you at all. There's lots of different false narratives. And when we hear it over and over again, in the very beginning, we might get like, whatever, you know, I mean, that's one, that's rude, and two, that's untrue. But what happens when you hear something repetitive over and over again? You know, we start to believe it. I mean, that's why the Geico commercial works so well, is you hear about Geico 100 times a day. You're like, maybe Geico's the insurance for me. Okay, if we have repetition over and over again, we begin to believe it. And we all know that us humans have a tendency of believing the negative much quicker than the positive. So do you feel sometimes like a shell of a person? Do you question your value? Do you find yourself wondering, is this true? Am I a bad person? Am I mean? Am I abusive? Okay, think about that. Have these narratives been used upon you? Have you been called abusive? And do you find yourself wondering, well, I've never touched them. I don't yell. I don't understand what's going on here. Because a lot of times the false narratives, right, are created so that the other person takes the burden off of them. Now, it's not always conscious, right? It can be subconscious. And it's also what I call deflection. Okay. For example, when somebody is saying that the other person's cheating, I think you're emotionally cheating on me, you're cheating on me. You know, you're always a cheater. You were a cheater once and you'll always be a cheater. You have a cheater mindset. You know, a lot of times that false narrative, one, keeps the other person obviously on the defensive, but it also keeps the other person from ever asking questions of the person that's creating the false narrative because they're trying to defend themselves. Once we hear something over and over long enough, though, it's like we allow ourselves at that point to be beaten down. And it's almost like we lose that self-esteem, that little bit that we have left, it's like it goes out the window. And we start believing it. You know, we start believing that we have no friends. We start believing that our friends are just really, you know, patronizing us. We start believing the stuff that the spouse or the significant other is saying. And when we believe these false narratives, what happens is we usually we go within, right? We hide, we worry, we live in fear, and then it makes us more codependent to the other person because we're thinking, okay, well, if I'm so bad, at least I have this person. Okay, at least I have this person. And that's why we become a shell of a person, because a person keeps creating the false narratives, isolating you more and more from other things, and you begin to constantly believe it. So why do we believe these false narratives? That's the big question. Why do the false narratives, why do we believe it? I mean, if we were solid, why do we believe it? And so that's a really good question. Is that in order to not believe the false narratives, we have to actually honestly know who we are, because we wouldn't accept the false narratives otherwise. But the reason why we believe it is because we've been trained that way. Many of us have been told the same narratives about ourselves throughout childhood, right? Maybe mom, dad, grandma, or grandpa kept telling us, we're weird, or we're not valuable, or we're not good enough, or we're never going to make it, or we're never going to be successful, or you're never going to have friends. Nobody likes you. You're just too weird. Whatever that narrative is, we hold on to that, right, into our conscious, and sometimes our subconscious. We don't always remember it's there. And so when our spouse or significant other says something that's derogatory or hurtful or makes us question our value, it hits home, right? Because all of a sudden we're like, wow, maybe it's true. Maybe they are right. Maybe I'm not valuable. Maybe people don't like me. Maybe I'm never going to be successful. So when we go back into the recesses of our brain, we realize that we're actually kind of programmed, actually truly programmed, to believe these false narratives. And so this is interesting. So if you find yourself in a relationship right now, understand that the false narratives and the believing in them is based on pretty much our childhood and the way we were raised with those false narratives and the beliefs that we aren't good, that we aren't valuable. But also in the process of believing them, it's also a self-sabotage of us. We're self-sabotaging ourselves in the process believing this. And so I've realized that the only way out of these false narratives is to understand who you are, okay? Is to understand what defines you, is to understand, your values, your morals, your ethics, and to understand yourself fully. Because see, that's the big issue, is that most of us don't understand who we are, and so the false narratives become easy to accept because we believe it because we don't know the truth. In the next video, I want to go into how we actually begin to realize that these are false narratives, right? Because how do you begin to realize something's false if you don't know the truth and you don't know your full identity? In order for us to end the false narrative, we have to understand what we stand for, who we are, and we have to begin to let go of those negative thought processes or those negative narratives that were told to us when we were young, so we don't buy into the ones that we are given right now in this relationship. I hope this video has inspired you to think and learn about yourself. And in the comment section below, let me know of any false narratives that you've heard in your life. Was it something about you not being a good person, or you're never going to be successful, or people don't like you? Whatever that was, put it in the comment section, because we can all learn from one another. And those false narratives hurt. They hurt really bad. And these are the things that we need to get the information out so that we can persevere, but also we begin to learn our truth. When you get a chance, check out the join option here on the channel. We have great content for members only. And I look forward to seeing you next in the next video. And don't forget to live your true life.